Webinar, everybody. I'm Tim Faitsch, Director of Technical Solutions here at Dodeca Software. And I recently had the opportunity to sit down with two people who know EPM and AI better than just about anybody I've ever talked to. Kyle Goodfriend, Principal Solutions Engineer at Oracle, and Peter Nitschke, Founding Director of Pivot2 Solutions. Because Peter's joining us from Australia, we pre-recorded this one to work around the time zone gap. I have to say that this discussion exceeded my expectations. One thing to watch, Kyle knows groovy programming better than just about anyone in this space, so keep an ear out for what he has to say about it. It's worth the wait. If you've got any questions or comments as it's going on, I'll be monitoring those and I'll check in at the end. But let's get into it. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. I've got a couple of people to talk with me about AI in the EPM world. So I've got here Kyle Goodfriend from Oracle, and I've got Peter Nitschke who is the founder of Pivot2 Solutions. So really excited to talk to you both today about AI and what's going on. So Kyle, what have you been up to? What projects you have cooking right now?
Oh, the things are changing so fast now with AI, and I feel like, and Oracle included, I feel like all of these organizations are just telling people to use AI, and there's no training. I mean, when have we ever got something this powerful, whether it's a system or technology or whatever, and nobody gets training? And it's absolutely crazy when you think about it. But I have spent the last 4 months really focusing on how do we use AI efficiently? How do we use less tokens? How do we maximize our efficiency? Do we use local models? Do we use Claude or Codex? And I've even expanded, not just building applications with AI from an EPM perspective, from taking a requirements document to building an application literally in hours. I've also spent a lot of time just personal. I'm a super creative person. I love being able to do things that are new and different, and I've actually got two applications right now that are live on the App Store. One is called Keep Close, and it's kind of like a CRM for your personal world. One of the things that I always had challenges with is maintaining who I haven't caught up with. I have I'm very fortunate that I have a very broad audience of people that I've connected with over my life, and maintaining those relationships has been challenging. So it helps with that. It's really cool. You should check it out. And then one that I just released this week is called Lumi. It's actually a presentation tool. So you can cut out areas of the screen to show. You can draw. It's like Zoom it, but on steroids. And
Okay.
it's for the Mac, which the Mac is lacking on some of those tools I found. So I thought, hey, I can just build it myself now with AI. So that's really exciting. The Windows version is coming out in a couple weeks. If you go to Goodfriend Solutions, you can check out some of the things that I'm working on, that I'm allowing AI to help me build some of these things that have always been things that I've wanted to do, but never had the time to learn Swift code and all the things that you have to learn to get some of these things published. So it's been
Sure.
a really exciting 4 months.
Cool. Awesome. How about you, Pete? Thanks for joining us early in the morning from Australia.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, for Pivot 2 and I suppose the broader Australian market, um, we've we actually leveraged we probably moved a bit sideways from kind of Oracle EPM when NetSuite dropped, particularly in Australia. It's a big NetSuite market, and they kind of launched NetSuite EPM. That's really where we moved a lot of our focus, and we've spent a lot of time over the last 5 years, kind of working with organizations more on that kind of NetSuite side. And I think for that and the interplay with that, particularly with all of these AI tools coming, because they are smaller markets, they're a lot more nimble in it. So we're probably working a lot with clients who are starting to use, things like Claude, things like ChatGPT, all the way through to how to actually embed those things into, hey, I've got a 16-week cash flow, I've got NetSuite, I've got an MCP for NetSuite that I can pull some data. Can I grab some data from EPM and bring it all together and blend it into a query here? So some really interesting work kind of happening on that side. More broadly for us, Pivot2, so we're Australian EPM firm. So founded myself and two others, been running since 2019, been working from home or remotely since 2020. So
Sure.
it's a very remote organization. We're kind of scattered all the way up and down the East Coast of Australia. And yeah, really kind of specializing on the EPM kind of side, really focusing on kind of NetSuite EPM side. So probably the thing that we've been working on, and I will credit Lisa Muir, one of the other directors, who, much to my chagrin, is probably the least technical of the three developers, but she's looked at this, this AI thing coming, and she's like, we need to be doing more of this. And she's kind of forced the issue a little bit in, right, like, let's actually have our internal processes. So we've got Claude licenses, we've got, skills, we've got, training that we do internally. We've got this kind of internal teams that we kind of spin up to like share skills that we've got. So really kind of trying to drive a lot of the internal stuff just so we get our kind of internal hygiene working around how we want to use it. And then, as I said, working with clients both in Oracle EPM tools as well as then kind of other tooling to kind of make things better.
And when she's kind of driving you to use AI more, what's the force behind that? Is it everybody's doing AI, or is it, hey, I'm going to be able to get productivity gains here, or why do you think that for that example they're pushing you on that?
Well, I think it's, as an organization, we're very blessed. We've got a number of very, very highly talented developers. And I think if you look at that as a group, they are really the people that can best leverage kind of the AI kind of assistant to really move and accelerate forward, right? Like one senior developer, if they're T&M, they could be the greatest Oracle EPM developer in the world, but they can work 8 hours a day, right? Like that's the extent of what you can do. If that's and it will be the greatest code you've ever seen, and no one will ever see it because there'll never be a bug in it, right? But if you're more effectively using some of the tooling, it allows you to do things like hyper personalization. So we can start with a broader template that has workforce and P&L drivers and balance sheet and so on and so forth, and we can grab a requirements document, overlay that on kind of the files directly, and then just start uploading all of it. And all of a sudden we've got their naming conventions in the instructions, in the documentation, in all of these things, which historically no one's ever wanted to go back and update. Everyone says, oh, let's just write the best documentation once and we'll never have to touch it again. And it's like, even in that sense for what we do, because there are always small changes that clients want, small things that will make it better, keeping all of that stuff in sync has been a challenge. And if you're trying to do it at a speed and efficiency and at a quality that you want, using the tools and wrapping the tools around it just allow you to leverage so much of your internal capability without needing to hire a technical writer to just come in and be bored out of their mind and write. I shouldn't say that. I have met some of the most lovely technical writers that have so much respect of what they do. I just could never do it. I would literally last half a day. But yeah, that kind of thing where it's like actually being consistent in what you're doing, how you're doing it, even the dumb stuff like having better test cases, because you can actually use it just to write slightly better instructions. Like the first 5 test cases that you write are great, and then by the time you've hit test case 23, you're just like, click on the thing. So actually having it be consistent, have the same voice, have the same kind of detail, it just makes everything look so much better and feel so much better, and it is so much better for a client.
Okay, cool. So go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say I'm working with a person that I won't name names who has somewhat resisted the AI change, and I finally got him to work on a project with me where we said we're just going to use Codex. We use Codex at Oracle, so I said we're going to use Codex to build the application. He's like, yeah, well, whatever. And, and we did in large part. And the things that I think, and this is where I think a lot of people just haven't gotten to yet. And I mean, the speed of this, right? I mean, I'm blessed that I've been able to spend the last 4 months actually just playing with it. And a lot of people don't
If you could
have
just
that.
take one step back for those who maybe don't know what Codex is, maybe like give just a real high level overview of what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Codex is the version of ChatGTP that is more on the code building side. So Anthropic, which is Claude, they have Claude Code. ChatGTP has Codex. And I think those are probably the two biggest players right now in the market.
Yeah.
So Codex allows you to, build a lot of these things. So you can build skills and you can build personas and hooks and all these things that allow you to just be more effective. Is it replacing a job yet? I don't know. It maybe, but I was working with this person trying to get him to start using it. And just things like, we had it build sample data. So, like a tax rate, for example, doesn't exist in all of the cells, right? All of the entities. It exists in one, or maybe it exists in each entity, but not at the product level and not those types of things, right? The cross-dimensional operators. And we said, okay, build all the calculations for a workforce application based on these requirements. And it did, and they were vastly inaccurate. And he's like, this is useless. I'm going to have to go into all these calcs and fix these. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm like, tell it, like it built the data. It knows where the data is. Have it connect to the application and have it test these calculations. It'll figure it out. And, we have the luxury of knowing that it's a cross-dimensional issue on a couple of them. That's probably what it is on a lot of them. And so ask it to look at the cross-dimensional operators. You created the data, you created the calculations. They're not in sync. Fix them. And it went through all the calculations and fixed, 95% of the issues that it originally created. So I don't know if that's the type of thing that Peter was going to get to, but those are the types of things that I see. An implementation is just going to be so different now. I mean, if I was going to do an implementation, I would actually go say, hey, act like a P&A manager in whatever industry it is, and I want you to build the requirements for what, let's say, retail, like all the requirements for what retail would need to run their business. And the first thing I would probably do is I would go in and I would say, here are all the things I think you're going to need. Here's the requirements document. You tell me where I'm wrong. You tell me where you're different. Imagine the speed of being able to have the requirements on day one and then tweak them, as opposed to having conversations for 6 to 8 weeks to learn the requirements. I mean, those are the types of things I think are just, it's just mind blowing how much different things are going to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months.
So faster, cheaper, better, which like all of those, like
I personally think yes, all of those are because if you think about like the requirements example that I just gave, you know, we've all implemented. And one of the challenges when you go in and you talk to a finance person, accounting person, whatever, is they don't know the possibilities. So they don't know what to ask for. And yes, we have a lot of experience and we coach them. They ask for A, we say we can do B, C, and D. But when you put it in paper, and then not only put it in paper, but you actually build a prototype in a day based off those requirements, and they get hands-on, the first week that you're there, they're going to be able to see what's possible and stop being stuck behind what they historically thought of as limitations in software or whatever it is, right? Just because most people are going to tell you, I want to recreate what I've done.
yeah.
The thing, just to kind of follow that on, so one of the things that we've done internally is, on Friday we've got like a 1 hour kind of thing, and it's like, oh, go and make something better. Doesn't really matter what it is. Like everyone's looking at different things, make something better. And one of the guys came to me and he's like, hey, our balance sheet model's great, but no one looks at it. Yeah, well, it's great. You guys got all this fancy logic. You've got timings. You've got all this stuff. You can. Yeah, do they understand they can look at the data by crosstab? And he's like, yeah, I think they understand that. You've told them enough, right? All right, cool. He's like, you need a good report. all right, fine. You go off and build me a good report. And he went into Claude Designer and just said, hey, I want a balance sheet. I want a one-page balance sheet report. And okay, cool. Comes back. This thing looks better than anything I could build in management reporting, but that's right. I've got other people that can do that. Um, but I'm like, all right, that's fine. But like, you've just given me a page. And he's like, no, no, no. And he sends me this Excel file, and it's a list of all the measures in our kind of naming convention, what the formulas would be in order to make those members work uh, in like a SmartView load format. This is someone who's a functional, analyst. He's not a developer, never written code before. He's like, I don't know if that code's right. I'm like, I'm concerned that that code does actually look right, but I'm going to say that just quietly to myself. Um, we just loaded it in, and then it took them longer to build the report because I was being picky about it, just to kind of say, oh, can we fix this formatting? Can we fix this? And all of a sudden, we've got a report that's really best practice for really no, I won't say no cost, because obviously there's costs associated with that, and there's
Yeah.
understanding and knowledge associated with that. But that would be very difficult for an external to do without something like this, because if you're talking to a client and they've got a dashboard that they've spent 3 years building, iterating, and got, you can go, great, that looks great. We'll build that, no worries. To do that kind of in isolation without having a client to kind of bounce that off, without having real data to bounce it off, without having kind of anything like that to kind of work on, is very, very difficult, because it's like, I don't know what they want. I could just throw stuff at the wall. This could take weeks. I could end up with something that no one actually wants to use. Whereas this is actually really solid, really good, really simple. And you can just kind of then leverage all of the, I suppose, architecture that's wrapped around it. Whereas if we want to just add a couple of more KPIs, great. Here's the SmartView sheet. Type in what you want, put the formula in, hit submit. We've got another KPI. So it's that kind of thing for us. Really is just getting really exciting, because it's building data sets is a nightmare. Like building data
Right.
that looks real, that's not real, that kind of can work for, it's all well and good to have something that'll work for one page on a for a 15-second view on a demo, right? But if I want to demo insights, great. I need 3 years of data that looks realistic, that's in the right spot, that doesn't have just these weird arbitrary trends in it. That's just, that'll take me the better part of
That's a
6 weeks, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, that kind of thing is just so exciting to be able to kind of really extend what we can do. So to your point, Tim, it's like, it's cheaper because that's incredibly expensive to do. To sit and have an intern generate data is great, cool. 4 weeks later, you'll get a data set and it won't balance, but you'll probably be like, we'll just force it in, it'll be fine.
Yeah, and that,
Better.
and just to build on that, like now, I'm sure you guys are probably doing this, but that's one of the pain points for us in building demos, is having data that makes sense, and to be able to say, hey, I want you to build data that represents the market characteristics of the last 3 years, COVID, whatever, 5 years. I want you to go out to, there's many places that you can go get, hundreds of thousands of statistics, whether it's inflation, unemployment, consumer confidence, those types of things, and say, I want you to model it after this. And I want the data to be real. And I want to have 50 entities, and 200 products, and
Yeah.
have it come back in 10 minutes and give you a load that's in the planning format that you can just import. Is like, it's just crazy.
I love how all of us are in like sales and pre-sales. It's just like the hardest thing in the world is coming up with fake data.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Peter, like that kind of moves into, I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about is, where people are actually using AI, and, where it's marketed and talked about. And I think Oracle, markets it as, inside of EPM. You've got insights, you've got predictive planning, you've got advanced predictions, you've got all these things that take advantage of AI to build these. And what I'm finding is that I think I think right now, and this may change tomorrow as fast as things move, but what I'm finding is there's way more value in using AI to build something that does something in the platform, as opposed to using the AI that's in the platform. And I'll give you an example. I work with customers every week. to try to adopt AI and do things. And there was a customer that was struggling. And every customer that I work with on advanced predictions has the same issue. They're like, we don't know the correlations. We don't know what accounts to use. We don't know what drivers to use that correlate to the data. And I was like, yeah, I know. And you know, I have some skills. And when we talk about skills, there are skills in AI. They're called skills. They're kind of like people or, functional things that actually do things that have the ability to like write Groovy. Like I don't write Groovy anymore. I just tell it what I want and it writes the Groovy for me.
Wow.
And so while I was on with the customer, I said, okay, they're struggling with can you create me a Groovy rule? And I didn't know if it would do it. I said, can you create me a Groovy rule that finds the correlations? And they said, these are the 5 accounts that we want to predict. And let's just use all the balance sheet accounts, that could possibly correlate. Right. And I told Codex what I wanted. And I said, these are the 5 accounts that are in their hierarchy. I want everything under balance sheet to see if it correlates with those accounts. I want you to tell me if there's a lagging indicator up to 6 months. And I want you to give me a confidence score. And I want you to create a report in the inbox that has every account. And if it correlates to those 5 accounts with the correlation score, the confidence score, and the lagging indicator, if there is one. And it created this huge report that you could load, it's a CSV in the inbox that you could load into Excel, that you could create a pivot table that would show you all of their things, all of their accounts that correlated, whether a 1 strongest, -1, which is actually still very strong. It's just negatively correlates. And a 0 is no correlation. And when I was on the call with this person in 40 minutes, I created a Groovy calculation that was probably 700 lines long, and I validated it in one of my environments. I gave it to them. They ran it in their environment and had a report at the end of a 60-minute conversation, and it had all the correlations. And then I was like,
Wow.
well, now that they have the correlations, we can use the correlations, to create the advanced predictions. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Can't Now that I have AI, I don't know how to write Python, but can I write my own Python for, the bring your own ML to import to do the advanced predictions? And so I started asking questions about that. And I mean, within 2 hours, we literally had a Groovy calculation that would find the correlations and then run a multivariate prediction with lagging indicators on their data.
Wow.
And I think those are the things that people don't think about, that I'm finding that are way more valuable than actually using, and I hate to say this, without using what's in the platform right now. I mean, I'm sure that's going to change, but I'd be curious, Peter, like, what is your experience with some of that?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I may have been talking, I don't remember, it was probably yourself, Tim, but at Kscope this year versus Kscope last year versus more kind of like 2024. I think Oracle's position really when ChatGPT had just started and kind of Claude was a twinkle in someone's eye, right? That hey, finance data is different. People might go ask ChatGPT for cooking recipes and so on and so forth, but no one's going to load finance data. We need to get on the front foot of this. But as Oracle, we're end to end. There is a position, there's a good moat to say, hey, everything's going to be controlled in your one environment. So we'll get there and so on and so forth. And then everything moved so fast that 2 years later, so this year, it's okay, so it turns out that CFOs have just been dumping their finances into ChatGPT and asking questions, and apparently
Yeah.
we're good with that now. And I think that side of that tooling has really been fascinating. I think as a kind of a technological whatever, to kind of say, wow, there is demand from people who understand what they want to do, who are sitting in that role, who, like Kyle, can go, hey, I know I must have correlations in my data. I'm not a data scientist. I don't know how to write Python. I don't know how to do this, but I know they exist because I can see them, right? I can see them because I've been looking at this data for 20 years, and I've been in the industry for 40.
Sure.
And I think now access of the ability, to your point, Kyle, to build tools to do that, and to do that in a way that takes someone's actual understanding of the industry, of their own data, of their own processes, and say, hey, here's what I've got. Help me build something to answer some of these questions. I think look, if I'm a CFO, I'd love it. If I'm a junior analyst, I would absolutely love it. I'd be sitting there, working till 1 a.m, kind of, with all of this stuff, with all the ability to do things that, great. I want to write VBA. Now I've got to learn 6 months to learn how to write VBA. Yeah, I can learn VBA in 6 minutes. That's good enough. And if it doesn't work, I can just ask it questions until it does. Right. So the ability for people to wrap tooling around things with a speed that's just, and particularly, I think it's not just wrapping tooling. I think everyone's been able to wrap tooling around things. Like organizations have had big data science teams, but I think the challenge they've always had is they need people to come to them with problems. They need to go, right, what are you actually trying to solve? Oh, we want to work out why retention of our clients isn't there. Great, no worries. We'll go off and do that, right? I think the collapsing of the what do you want to do and how to do it into a single point is now someone is going, the sales manager or retention manager can go, hey, I want to work out why my retention's falling. I don't want to wait 3 months for the data science team to come back and tell me things that I probably kind of know, right? Oh, I see it when price changes, or when we haven't talked to people for a while. Here's all my data. Here's my CRM. Here's my call logs. Here's everything else. Build me something that will actually help. I think that collapsing and the speed in which that has happened, I don't think anyone thought 3 years ago that we would be here in 3 years. Like, I think, you kind of go, oh, we've all been using it so much in our day-to-day lives. We're like, it's kind of a little bit like, it just kind of happens. 3 years ago, you would ask ChatGPT to build you an image and everyone would have 7 fingers, right? Like,
Sure.
that was the world 3 years ago, and then 18 months ago, it was like, they were kind of starting to look kind of more realistic, but you could still kind of pick it. Now you can't pick it. Now it's real. Right.
Yeah.
So it's that speed in which that's happened, I think is fascinating. And I think that tooling that you talk about, Kyle, one of my guys, Bakan, talks about that as well. He's like, I don't trust it to write my code for me, but I trust it to write a tool that will write my code for me, because I can control that and I can look at that and I can understand that, and that will then, allow me to do things that are repeatable, that are fast, that are efficient, that are the same. If I'm just kind of throwing something at it and it's just kind of spinning up a different, chaos indicator every time and I'm getting slightly different variances, that's kind of not what I want. But if I can get it to build me something, I get it, or everything that I need and nothing that I don't want.
And I think historically, one of the things that I find very interesting and scary, quite honestly, is that historically, you think like in my 50s, like I had an Atari when I was younger, and it was blocks, and I think you had 16-bit colors and whatever, and there was a limitation in the processor to do things. There was a limitation in the graphics card to do things. We've experienced those things up until maybe the last year, or maybe even 6 months ago, where the limitation was always the hardware or the video, or the speed of the reading the hard drive. It was always a hardware technology type of an issue. And what I find fascinating, and again extremely scary, is that I think that now the limitation is the human. Because I had a conversation with somebody with Kscope, and I said, hey, like, this AI, it's scary and it's amazing. And they said, yeah, I mean, it can find variances. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it can find variances, but it can also dig into and explain why those variances existed. And I've spent a lot of time in banking. So you think I didn't hit my balances. Why didn't I hit my balances? Maybe it has to do with, I didn't, my credit score risk rating isn't lax enough. I'm declining too many people. I'm not having people approve loans quick enough. Those types of things all impact how many loans you take on. And I said, so it can figure that out based on the data that it can say, hey, like, the reason that you missed your numbers is because you weren't getting the applications, you weren't approving the applications quick enough, you weren't approving as many applications as you needed to, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on. And I was like, so it can now find that. And now it can also go to the next level and say, okay, hey, these are the reasons why you didn't hit your numbers. And here's what you need to catch up. What I recommend is that you increase your marketing in the Arizona market. And I think you should hire more, loan people to review the loans. I think you should reduce your credit score, or I think you should reduce or increase your credit risk. It can give you 5 different things,
Are you seeing stuff
situations.
like that, like in the real world right now, like applications like that? Like,
I am not, and that's why I think the limitation now is on the human brain and whether they're willing to accept some of those things. But right now, in the Oracle EPM platform, you could totally do that. Like that is within, that's a realistic thing to do right now.
okay,
But to get people to see that and accept it and build it and use it, I just don't think people are ready yet.
okay.
I, I think as well, it's an interesting one. And I'm in a couple of small business groups, and it is fascinating, some of the small guys. So I'm talking kind of organizations, sub 50 people. And they look at it and they're like, the cost of hiring, the cost of training someone, the cost of doing, these kind of things is so high. I'm the MD, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO. It's actually still worth my time to go off and spin up some tooling to help with some of these processes, because my other option is 10% more headcount, which is tough. So I think there will be a split in organizations. I think there'll be a split in organizations. I also think there'll be a split in people, and the people one I'm significantly more worried about. But I think there'll be a split in organizations, those that just kind of lean in because they've got someone who's got the time and the headspace and can think like Carl's talking about. They can just kind of go, well, what if I didn't, have to do this manually? What if I just automated all of that and said, give me feedback, right? There'll be organizations that do that. And I've met a couple, but they've never been, it's not the 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 person organizations yet that are doing that at an organizational level. But I would swear, if you walk into some of those big organizations where you've got some smart operators, they're doing it. They might not be telling anyone about it. They're ahead of probably what their own internal policies are saying they should be able to do. They're certainly ahead of what any external policies are saying that, you should be allowed to do. Banking would be a really good example, Carl. I think the external legislation around the requirements to approve or reject loans, how far away are they really from being legislated to a point where you could train an AI tool to do it and not be sitting there with your legal team going, yeah, we're not 100% sure how it's working, but it's got a lot of code in it, and the legal team going, oh, well, yeah, you never ever turn that on, and you just hide it in the corner somewhere. So I think that gap there, and I would say internally as well, right? Like there's a lot of organizations, I think, where, they don't have a policy around AI, or they've got a policy, but it's a bit wishy-washy, or they've got a policy and it's super strict. You can't connect to Claude, you can't connect to ChatGPT. No data that none of our data can ever go onto these platforms. I would be very surprised if there were not a number of organizations where there are senior people who are just, on those, policies and just going, hey, can you just help me draft this? Can you, review that kind of thing? And that for me is probably the really fascinating thing as kind of like economical behavior, right? That people, we have dragged clients kicking and screaming into using tools sometimes, that have been stuck in their ways of how they want to do forecasting, how they want to do budgeting, getting them to use SmartView, which is like the greatest tool in the history of the Dodeca obviously is better, but SmartView is
Thank
certainly
you.
up. But and then all of a sudden they can just go to ChatGPT and ask it questions and get feedback, and they're using it as if it's the easiest to use tool in the world. And you're like, did we just need to put voice and text in these things, 20 years ago? Like,
I have like 6 things I wanted to ask you from what you just said, but I'm really curious about that. Are we really close to, we don't have Smart View anymore? We've got what was my net income last quarter? Like, are we, like, how close are we to that?
We have customers that are doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say that I have CFOs who, if I said tomorrow, here is a NetSuite EPM and you can uninstall SmartView on your machine and just talk to Claude, and it's going to be accurate to a level of accuracy that you're comfortable with. It's not going to be 100%, right? It's not going to have every nuance. It's not going to pick up the weird error that, you've got something that's unmapped or going in the wrong spot, but it'll be directionally accurate. I think I'd get probably half a dozen who would be calling me by midday saying, "Hey, can you install it?"
Okay.
So I think there is there. I think if you're an analyst, it's probably further off. I mean, I think there's comfort in being able to kind of understand and pull data in, even if you're then using, Claude, Codex, whatever, to kind of augment your understanding. But I would say that, yeah, I mean, and I say that because, I am well aware of some who, we're going to rename nameless, but are certainly not blameless, who get my reports and put them in Claude, right? Or get their kind of financial month-end statements
Yeah.
and put them in ChatGPT to get commentary on it, to then kind of copy it back into kind of board papers and so on. So, to say that they don't want to skip the first step of having to get the report in the first instance, I think is naive at best, right? Like,
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you, Peter. I find that a huge percentage of people have huge misconceptions about what AI is. And I'll give you an example. And I'm one of them. Like the last 4 months have been a journey for me. And every time I think I'm good at it, I realize there's more to learn and I'm not. And that I didn't know what I thought I knew about it. I built an application and I said, listen, I want you to act like a banker, a HELOC banker, and I want you to forecast the data. I'm going to give you the history. I'm going to give you, I want you to go out to the Fred database that I've talked about a number of times in other platforms, and find data that would, represent, mortgages, those types of things. And I want you to act like a human and I want you to forecast those numbers. And it does. And I'm like, okay, so what did you actually do? Like, I want to understand how you acted like a human. And it came back and said, well, I had the history. You said I was a statistical savant. So I use statistical methodologies to use historical data and predict future data to come up based on what I think the market is going to look like to predict that number. I was like, okay, so you use math. Yeah, I used math. And that was a huge eye opener for me because I expected it to not use math. I expected it to use emotions and things like that. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I've had in the last 4 months working with our development team at Oracle and doing it myself is that AI uses math. Like it will decide what math to use, but it's still using math.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people are scared to let AI do something because they don't know what it's going to do. And if you told them it's just using statistical models and it'll tell you what statistical model it's using, they'd be like, oh, well, then I'm fine with it touching my data.
Yeah. I think there is it's a kind of fascinating one, isn't it? Just like the whole generative side of it, where it's yeah, the messaging around, so much messaging, like the boomer posts on Facebook, right? Kind of messaging, but in the business world. Where it's like, oh, but it's just it's making stuff up, right? Like it doesn't have a brain. It's not a thing. It's just, it's making stuff up. You can kind of ad absurdum all that way down to like kind of Markov. It's just a Markov chain, right? It's just basically finding the next best word and kind of linking it through. You're like, yeah, it is, but it's pretty good at it now, right? Like it's got a lot
Yeah.
of words it could find. And I think particularly where we talk kind of the vein of the entrance into kind of finance, and I think particularly to your point earlier on, Kyle, around tooling, I think that for me is really probably going to be the turning point. Once people know that they can trust it, because it will just, if you don't like the number, you just say, how did you come up with that? And it can kind of come back and say, well, this is how I built it. And they can look at that and go, oh, well, yeah, okay, I can see, all right, I was wrong. That does make more sense than my intuition around what that number should be. The flip side of that is you can very easily right now ask Claude, based on financials, give me a forecast, and then start a new session and say, give me a forecast, and start a new session and say, give me a forecast. And you'll get three very different numbers. It will be, they'll be directionally the same, but they'll be different. And I think, and this is always just, how well do people understand stats? How well do people understand probability? It's not a very intuitive subject for a lot of people, even FP&A specialists, right? Like you talk to the data science groups, yeah, sure, stats and probability and how that all kind of pans through is a really kind of understood, known topic. If you're talking to a commercial manager around the fact that confidence intervals on hitting targets, they're like, am I going to hit it or not? You're like, well, yeah, like 80% chance you're going to hit it. And they're like, so is that yes? Because it's more than 50%. You're like, no, that's kind of not what I'm saying. So I think there's a lot of that, and how quickly that understanding develops in the market, I think will be a really fascinating thing, because the counterpoint to it and the other side of it is people just asking it to give them a number and just keep asking until it gives them the number they want, right? Because they have all these models, unless you're really categorically telling it not to, they will try to help you come to an answer, right? And if you keep giving them guidance, they will keep going, well, they must know something I don't know, and basically keep trying to push you down that path. And that's, I think, the strength of trying to build tooling rather than just asking for answers. But I think in the first instance where people don't understand the power of tooling, probably don't understand the tools well enough, don't understand how these things should be structured and what would make sense. The real risk is, for one of your questions that you kind of mentioned in the email, what does this look like for planning and forecasting? I think there will be a very big risk that in a forecasting sense, someone will get 5 forecasts, right? And they'll all look very good, and they'll all be defensible, and they'll all have a really lovely set of dashboards and everything hanging off it. But at a certain point, that's just 5 different numbers, right? That's, if you think about what you want a forecast to do in an organization, which is to help guide the next round of decision making around, all right, if this is what it's actually saying and we want to change that, we want our revenue to be higher, what's that next step? I think having 5 versions of it doesn't help that. Having 5 versions of it, it kind of makes that next set of conversations harder, because they're like, well, if we want that revenue number, can we just, what assumptions did that one make? But we don't want that cost number, right? And the assumptions are hire 3 more salespeople. You can't kind of pick and mix your way through a model like that. So I think that side of where AI sits in forecasting and planning is a really interesting thing. I thought, and I am on record saying this, that COVID was the end of budgeting, right? That particularly in Australia, like when it hit, it was basically right in the middle of our financial year. Everyone's budget got blown out of the water. And I'm like, people aren't even bother doing budgets anymore. You've got an annual budget, stuff changes too quickly. No one's going to be doing it anymore. 3 years later, everyone's doing annual budget still, right? And they're still spending 6-8 weeks doing it, and they're still going through that process and so on. AI is probably the one where I see a shift. Whether that will ever be, we're going to use AI to build a budget process for us. We're going to use AI to build us an outer range of numbers. I'm not sure. I mean, budgeting has never been the quest for the best number. Budgeting has always been the quest for the best number that someone in the organization can own. And I think there is really a fundamental problem if a lot of that thinking has been offloaded. And that's whether it's been offloaded to an AI tooling or offloaded to the junior analyst. The junior analyst can't own the budget, right? Like they can build the numbers, but they, the CEO, that's the CEO's job. That's why they get paid the big bucks. So I think that side of it is probably a very difficult thing to land, just not because it can't do it, but because whether it's actually the process. But for forecasting, does forecasting need to at all, where you can build a micro forecast of anything in your business, whether it's sales, whether it's ops, whether it's inventory, whether it's workforce, whether it's retention, and you can get versions of that very, very quickly that you can just throw away, but will give you guidance, will give you understanding of what's happened, what's going to happen in the short term, what decisions do I need to make now, what decisions should be making in 3 months' time. Like the bigger, broader, harder, more rigid tooling that we've all spent 20 years building for forecast, how much value does that have when, if something changes, it's harder to make it kind of align?
Yeah, that's very well said. And I am cognizant of our time here, so we've gone over by a few minutes. I don't know if you have a final thought, Kyle, that you'd like to add in here.
Oh my goodness. I think that there are as many people that are frightened to death of it, and don't trust it and don't know it because they don't understand what it's doing. And I think if there's anything that I could get people to, I guess, understand is I get a lot of people saying, well, I think it should just do that. It should be an easy button, right? I should press the button. It should find the correlations. It should do this, and it should do all those things I want. And I guess what I would hope people would understand is that you can educate this, you can teach this, you can coach it to, think more properly, to respond with more thought, validate itself. One of the things that I always tell when I'm building something is all my skills, it says never guess. You will never guess, because I often have, and I'm like, this is still not right. And it comes back and it goes, you're right, I was guessing. Like, you were guessing. Why were you guessing? So I think people get frustrated with it, not giving it the respect I think that it deserves. Are people, case from one of the presentations was, I feel like this is like giving, a 6-year-old the keys to the car, and they're like, go drive. No training, no education, no nothing, right? And if people would make the time to learn a little bit more about it, they will actually find that it is a tool that is more valuable than anything else they have. And I have said this to people. I said, if you gave me a budget and I could spend it on a computer, like a laptop, or I could spend it on AI, I would not have a laptop and I would spend it on AI.
No.
All right.
Because to me, that what I'm getting out of AI is far more productive and important than what I can do manually on a laptop.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks. All right. We're back here. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. A lot to chew on for sure. I just wanted to quickly throw up a couple QR codes here on the screen. So the one on the left, it will open an email to me. The one on the right allows you to connect with me on LinkedIn. So feel free to drop me an email or a connect on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with all of you. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we will be doing a couple of events at Oracle AI World in October. And if you're going to be there, shoot me an email. I will send you a personal invitation to one of those events. So I'm happy to do that. The other thing I wanted to do is talk about upcoming webinars. So I'm probably going to be doing another one of these AI discussion in this series coming up. Haven't decided on a date for that yet, but we also have the spreadsheet horror stories from Tim Toe, he'll be leading that presentation on October 21st at noon Eastern. So definitely looking forward to hearing those scary stories right before Halloween. And of course, if you've got spreadsheet issues and chaos and things like that, that's what we do best here at Dodeca Software. We've got our Dodeca spreadsheet management system, and we'd love to talk with you, love to do proofs of concepts, things like that. You can contact us, and we'd be happy to share all the cool things we're doing with AI in that software now. So looking forward to hearing from all of you, and hope you enjoyed the session. We'll see you later.